Thanks so much for being here. We're gonna pick up right from where we left off, and because the previous panel, Stephen Levitsky and Maria Stefan and Gabor Schering put a lot on the table for us. With me here today is Elyssa Feder. Rising Organizers is her organization. Over a decade of experience as an organizer and trainer. With Emily's List, Priorities USA, she's trained over 10,000 activists. And immediately to my left is Kettering Global Fellow Flávia Pellegrino. And you run an organization which in English is Pact for Democracy, Pacto pela Democracia. I don't know Portuguese, so thank you. And it's a coalition that orchestrates the pro-democracy ecosystem in Brazil. I'm one of the provocative questions that the panelists actually had difficulty answering from Maria, and thank you, Maria, for this question, was how do you incentivize courage? I want to shift it because we're talking about action and organizing. So let's start with Elyssa, with you. How do you incentivize action?
Great. Thank you all. And Brad, thanks for having me on this panel. I really appreciate this question and this addition to the frame of how do we incentivize courage, how do we incentivize action, because I think action is the thing we're ultimately looking for. We're looking for people to do things potentially in the face of being uncourageous. And one of the things that we work on a lot at Rising Organizers is having people understand that they are not alone in this. That feeling blended with a toolkit, with a sense of next steps, is the thing that leads to action. I don't want to downplay the role of authoritarianism among everyday Americans. There is a streak of people in this country who truly value the idea of being ruled by a leader that tells them what to do and takes care of everything and gets rid of the people that they don't like. But the majority of us, I continue to believe, but also more importantly, studies continue to show, believe in the same things. We want clean air, we want safe communities, we want good schools, and we have been told that the way for us to get there perhaps is to fight each other. And organizing says that actually we have far more in common, the vast majority of us, than those folks. And so I think the way that we engender courage, the way that we engender action is by saying, you are completely correct that you cannot do this by yourself. And you don't have to. In fact, you shouldn't even try. You should find, and we will help you find, people who agree with you, who are concerned about the state of this country, a state that I will offer has been exacerbated over the last 6 months, but certainly has been a bipartisan problem. The fight for democracy is one that is going to be led by people who have shared values and interests. And our job as organizers, your job as organizers, you're all organizers now, congratulations, and sorry, is to say that that's what we're going to make that easier for you. And I, as we were sort of approaching this question, there were two quotes that came to mind that I will offer as sort of a closing piece on this, which is about, both of which are about the instinct to be free. The first is a quote from Gandhi, in which he says, "I have nothing more to teach you. Truth and nonviolence are as old as the hills," which is actually a quote that you can find in one of the MLK memorial museums in Georgia. The other one I'll offer is from Andor, A Star Wars Story. Thank you for the crew that has seen it. And one of the things that they talk about on the show is that actually this lack of freedom, authoritarianism, tyranny, they say, tyranny is unnatural. It works so hard to protect itself because we all have the instinct to be free. And one of the things that authoritarians allow us to teach people, can get away with, is that your freedom has to come at the expense of somebody else's. And organizing says that actually the only way we're going to be free is if we do it together. And so I think the way that we create courage, and the way that we create action, is by getting into as many communities in as many ways as possible, and making sure that they don't just know that intellectually, but feel it in their bones.
Thank you. Yvonne, I hope that you'll add and/or into your lexicon of quotations to add to Hannah Arendt.
Yes. Yes. Right next door to each other.
Flávia, action. What does noncompliance look like?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. And what Elyssa was saying about building and incentivizing action and dealing with this, for me, from my experience, is the main strategy to do this is building a safe space, building trust. Because I totally agree with you that the main thing is about, we know that democracy is essentially a collective endeavor, a collective effort, and a collective fight. So from Pacto's experience and from what we've been building within Brazilian civil society, creating ways for us to unite and to share not only our expertise but also our strategies, and finding and building and providing a structure for us to be able, and those who are fighting for democracy, to be able to set their differences aside and focus on what we have to do as civil society, as democracy champions, and those who are willing to not only to preserve democracy, but to rebuild it and to revitalize it. I think there's the first thing to do is provide this structure, and I would say that. And of course, I'm biased here, and as a great enthusiast of building coalitions, but it's bringing together people who are definitely, I would say that start slow and start by building those connections. They're the basis for any other kind of action and for the new, to face this, the way this political landscape and authoritarian landscape evolves, if that makes sense. But, and I think we've been trying to share how building these kind of safe spaces and collaborative initiatives and efforts, especially not only nationally but internationally, it has been a great challenge for us. But at the same time, and I know there are many different social actors across the world reaching out to us, for example, to know how to build this kind of coalition, this broad and cross-ideological coalitions. And even though I think it's one of the main strategies and tools we have to rely on, and we can rely on to face this authoritarian and this democratic backsliding we're facing around the globe, this is not as well a silver bullet. This is something that varies, of course, accordingly to the national political landscape, but we have to. But the main strategy is how we can build this international solidarity and collaboration, because that's the only way we can effectively face the current global phenomenon on democratic backsliding.
So, Flávia, staying with you for a little bit, and this is really emphasizing the point that Maria made earlier, these multi-sector, multi-pillar spaces, not just for dialogue and getting together, but actually it has to work from space to space. and you brought in international coalitions. What kinds of things are you seeing borrowed and adapted from context to context?
Yes. Over the past 5 years especially, I've been engaged and talking to so many people across the globe, especially, and I think, and as I mentioned, I think building pro-democracy coalitions has been one of the main efforts I've seen around. And I've seen in different contexts, in different countries, different kinds of coalitions, from electoral coalitions that are structured in order to defeat an authoritarian candidate. I've seen coalitions among political leaders and political parties when, of course, running for elections. And also, of course, and my main experience is on building civil society coalitions. And this expertise, these strategies, and how to build this kind of space and how to share strategies to build across and to bridge across differences, and how to build these kind of collaborative and collective spaces are the main subject of interest, and of course, leading back to that's the main aspect I've been following, and I've been witnessing collaborations around. So in Latin America, for example, of course, we have like Pacto. We've been sharing a lot with our neighbors in Colombia, in Argentina, in Peru, trying to share what we've learned after 7 years of building this especially this cross-ideological coalition to defend the democratic rule of law, to counter authoritarian threats, and to revitalize our democratic environment. So I think these strategies on building narratives, on building new ways of collaboration among organizations and stakeholders in civil society that have different experiences and expertise and strategies of action, and that's the case. Building this, I would say that building this collective intelligence, and there are so many ways to do it, and this is, I would say, the main aspects we've been exchanging in most of the transnational collaborations and alliances and networks that that have been allowing us to build solidarity and to share effective ways to face and to defend democracy and to face the rise of authoritarians around the globe.
Elyssa, shifting to you, I've heard you make a critique of institutions and the support that they don't provide to the organizing world. Where are, and earlier in the panel before, we had quite a cri de coeur for institutions, among others. Where are they getting it right? Where are they getting it wrong?
What a question. Here, I think, are the good things. I think there are a lot of good things. I think that the first thing that I think institutions are getting right is that they understand that there's a problem. I don't think that we can get to a place where we are accurately addressing how we got here. And the question of how we got here is, I think, one that every panelist so far has been very interested in, and as am I. How we get out of it is, I think, requires an analysis of how we got here. I also think that institutions are doing when I say institutions, I'm talking about pro-democracy institutions. If you want me to talk about it different, I've got critiques for everybody. So if there's other institutions, you just let me know. I think a place where pro-democracy institutions are also getting it right is in these kinds of convenings where we can learn from each other. I come from an electoral, a political space. One of the things that has shifted since I entered into the democracy space, thanks for having me, has been deeper collaboration between expertise. So the voting systems people are talking to the organizers now, and a time when that was not always the case. So I think that there is an analysis aspect, there is a collaboration aspect that I think is incredibly important. The place where I think I would like to encourage all of us to improve is a sense of speed. I think we all have a sense of urgency. I think we talked about that in the previous panel. But urgency and speed of action are not the same thing. And we need to take more risks. We need to be OK with more failures. We need to be OK with understanding that some of us are going to lose some power for the sake of keeping other things. And so that might look like you don't get to, have your hallowed halls of only pro-institutionalized, more lowercase conservative C multimillionaires who are trying to figure out how to make the most strategic investment in democracy that has the highest KPIs. This is not that kind of work. This is work about saving people's lives, and that work requires us to have a democracy that's responsive to its people. And so I would push on the speed and the urgency and an acceptance of some risk. No matter what risk is here, you're in it. Figure out what kind of risk you'd rather have. And the other thing that I would do, and again, this speaks to the bias, is I think we need more long-term organizing institutions. And we need those institutions to not be ones that live in the movement space. And I love the movement space, and I have critiques of the movement space. But the movement space and the democracy space, in my experience, and I speak only for myself, have been pretty far apart. And there's real reasons for that and real tensions that exist within those two ecosystems. But having a movement lens in democracy work helps us solve the question of how did we get here? Because we got here because our institutions are not responsive to real people's needs. And movements build movements that are for real people's needs. And so figuring out how to bring those two things together, figuring out how to center organizing as a piece that is not separate from democracy space but is integral to it. I get into all sorts of stuff with people. And I get into it with the movement people because they want us at Rising Organizers to pick a movement. And what I always say to them is we're building democratic infrastructure that leverages the skills that movements have had, but not both here and around the world. And so the other offering that I will offer is to have a deeper analysis of how organizing is not just something that we, the organizers, do, but something that all of you do. Because if we enter any number of different crises, and they're coming, you all have the opportunities, the relationships, the resources to figure out how you are part of that puzzle. And that's part of the collaboration, that's part of the pillars that Maria talks about, that's part of how we get out of this incredibly sticky place. And so I'll summarize all of that by saying that I think the thing that this sector has been really good at is these kinds of convenings. And the other thing that I would like you to include in your next steps is how is the convenings not just us talking to each other, as much as I love talking to you all, but also how is it that you all are understanding that you're also on the ground. There is no ivory tower anymore. And I think organizers have the skill to help you get out of the ivory tower.
So I didn't have this on my question list, so
go for it.
So apologies, but you opened the door.
Oh no.
And it's being a little vulnerable here. Gatherings like these are critically important.
Yeah.
Where we can encounter one another across institutional lines. But right, they're not enough. In your view, Elyssa, and then I'm going to go to some questions from the audience, so get ready to get up and come up. what does the next step look like?
Yeah.
Like what should happen when we walk out of here?
Yeah. So I'll also offer that I have been keeping a keen eye on this whole space, and I have been already seeing this sort of critique I'm offering start to happen. There are already more conversations about organizing and democracy in the same space than there were when I entered this sector like 2.5 years ago. So I'll offer also that I actually think significant progress has been made. In terms of coming out of here, the thing that I would offer is that you all could go home. There's many options, but one is you could go home to your home institutions and figure out what is our organizing plan in case of an emergency. If there is there's any number of possibilities that could happen around the midterms. And I don't want to get into the doomsdaying of it all, but we sure can. But what's your plan? What are you going to do? And it has to be something more than a press release. It has to be something more than sending an email to your staff. It has to be about actually getting out into the world. And how you do that, of course, that is the core work of what we do at Rising Organizers. I'm extremely happy to talk to any of you about it. Our whole thing is how do we make organizing less siloed? And that includes bringing it to other aspects of the democracy space. But I think that would be my number one charge for all of you, is how is it that you all learn to organize and bring your institutions, your communities, your families with you in that process?
That's fantastic. As I said, I know most of you pretty well, so I'm going to invite you up to the microphones for some Q&A, and then we can come back to the panel. And if not enough people are coming up, I'll call on you. So come on up. Who has a question? Come on up. First over here.
Thank you. Hi, Brad. Lorelei Kelly.
Good to see you, Lorelei.
Hi. Yeah, I've been leading the modernization portfolio in the House of Representatives from Georgetown for the last 8 years. A lot of people don't realize that the House, at least, has substantially rebuilt its back end and created opportunities to devolve democratic practices outward. A lot of that was the pandemic. But another thing that we did that was really important for connecting movements and institutions is revised the ethics rules so that now members can partner directly with nonprofits in their districts on constituent services. This is huge. This allows all kinds of activities that Congress has no capacity to do for itself to go into the district. So just so everybody knows that, I can talk to you about it forever. That's not the only thing, though. So there's a lot of changes that are trim tabs on the aircraft carrier. My question to you, so I came to work in Congress with a South African anti-apartheid activist. She knew how to organize every room as soon as we walked in. And the thing I notice about Congress now that's so disappointing is not just the failure of the GOP to stand up for its institution, period, but the sort of the flabbiness of the Democrats to organize absolutely every opportunity in an opposition that is in the workflow of the institution. Like every room, every garage, every cafeteria should be doing the governing process of oversight. So I'm really interested in what you think about younger elected leaders coming up through the pipeline right now, because I don't see a level of sophistication of ability to organize in person on the ground that we've had with the civil rights era leadership. So the person I was with was in that era, and we really, with John Lewis, and there's maybe, Maxine Waters, there's hardly anybody left that knows how to actually organize movements inside of institutions. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a great question, and of course I'd be curious to hear your experience as well. We focus a lot on young people. We're not exclusive to it, but one of the places where I like to start as an organizer is who's identifying the problem, and then how do we give them sort of the skills and the analysis to approach that problem in a strategic way. And so I think there's a lot to unpack about your question. One of them is, I think, just around young people and the next generation of leaders and organizers in general. One of the things that I've been seeing with young people is a deep skepticism that is born out of their lived reality. The thing that we struggle with as organizers when talking to young people, we struggle with a lot of things, but one of them is helping them sort of get to a place where these institutions, you have to believe a little bit in the institution to try to organize to fix it. Or you have to believe a little bit in the concept of institutions to try to build alternative ones. And these are folks who've grown up seeing the failures over and over and over again. So I think that the answer to your question of how do we get to these new emerging leaders, how do we find them, I think there are a variety of tools for them. And I ran a training at Georgetown last week with the Center for Social Justice. And I will offer that I left that conversation much more hopeful than I walked into it. And it was because I saw just over the course of that training, the fact that we take young people seriously and we know that their lived reality is real and that we want to give them the tools, not to say, somebody asked a question of, do you think everything's gotten worse? And other people on the panel were trying to make her feel better. And I was like, yeah, maybe it has. And also maybe that's something that we know how to deal with because of people like your friend and because of people like John Lewis. So I think the place to go, the thing to do is figuring out how do we get in front of more of these young people? How do we take their concerns seriously and also not let them get stuck there? And that is, of course, part of what we do at Rising Organizers, but we are also very happy to partner with Georgetown in that.
Flávia, I want to take that to you too, and then we'll come over here. Young organizing, or actually, let's re-say it. Part of that question was rising generations of elected officials. What kind of organizing chops do they have? What are their abilities? What are you seeing in Brazil?
Especially those like in the institutionally.
Yeah. That was part of the question.
Yeah. In Brazil, I think we have a pretty interesting, not exactly optimistic experience around it. And I think an example is because we had, especially because in Brazil we have this major anti-system, anti-establishment sentiment and environment. And of course I could talk about it for a long time, but the bottom line is that we had around 2016, 2018 in Brazil, a major movement to renovate politics. And we had like new young leaders, and sometimes not that young, but new people running for office, running for Congress. And we had in Brazil back in 2018 the biggest renovation rates within the National Congress. And you could say, oh, that's a great thing, and it's good for democracy that it did happen. But the years following that, we've seen that it was only about changing people, but not changing the practices. So in our assessment, it was mostly about, it's not only about renovating, changing elected. We have to change the way politics and the way the democratic practices within democratic institutions are led and are built. So I think, and since then, in fact, the main narrative and the main efforts are not about changing people in power specifically, but how can we change the political environment in Brazil, and especially how can we actively listen to younger people on how this anti-establishment feeling, really listen to them to understand the roots of this distrust and the roots of this environment where in many, many ways we've seen an anti-politics movement grow in our country. So yeah, I think it's mostly about really laser focusing on practices rather than who is being elected and who, of course, I mean, that's of course important, but changing the practices rather than only changing who runs for office.
Right. Practices, not people.
Yeah.
Over here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Katharina Obser. I am the Democracy Program Director at the Kettering Foundation, which is one of the German political foundations associated but independent from the Greens in Germany. And I'm in the DC office. I wanted to follow up on the earlier conversation and pose a question, especially to you, Elyssa. You talked a lot about this very important piece of the movement space and the democracy space coming closer together, and really the movement space sort of being better integrated with, and the democracy space learning from the movement space. But you also said in the last 2.5 years you've seen some progress on this. I was wondering if you could share any concrete examples that can be used as a model for that moving forward for those of us here who are, taking away these learnings. Similarly, or if there's not a concrete example, like, is there a model, is there a vision for, here's what it would look like in X space? And then a second question is just, if either of you, and Flávia, you especially, if there are examples of where that learning has happened specifically across borders, specifically because of a convening maybe like this one or a different one, but there was a specific learning that shifted something that happened in the movement space in Brazil, or Elyssa, to your knowledge somewhere else, that would be really interesting to hear. Thank you so much.
That's a fantastic question. Those two parts, I think that's going to do it for us. So one to you, Elyssa, one to you, Flávia.
Great. Yeah. I will give Brad his flowers here and say that Brad was on a panel once, and I emailed him, and I've been following him around for the last 2 years, basically because of that. So thanks for taking me along. And I have seen Brad and thus Kettering, and I don't think you're unique in this, start to bring more of these different kinds of conversations together. I've seen that happen. I've been in those rooms. And so I think that's a great example of how these conversations are coming together. I also think on the movement side, movements are starting to take more seriously the idea that you can't win on climate, you can't win on immigration. These things that have become in movement spaces are kind of their own disparate, standalone things. You can't win on that stuff if you don't have a government that is responsive to you. And that requires a democracy. There are real critiques that I'm sure we all have in this room of the way that American democracy has played itself out over the last several decades, even after we reached this place of actual democracy not that long ago. But I think that the democracy conversation and the movement conversation have been pretty far apart. And so on both sides, I'm seeing this recognition of how we need each other. And some real material ways in which people are actually having those conversations in a deeper way than existed when I got here in all of 2022.
Flávia, unfairly in the last minute or so, international examples. It's a small ambit. Go for it.
Yes, I mean, I can start by my own example back in 2022 when we had this challenging election in Brazil. The integrity of our elections was at stake, and I reached, and it was not about it didn't start at a convening, but in a press article that told the story on how the U.S. civil society had defended the integrity of elections back in 2020. And I read that article, and I was taking notes of the names, and I reached out to every single person that was mentioned at that article, and I said, what did you do, and how did you made it? And from that moment on, we started collaborating back and forth because I got inspired by what the U.S. civil society had done back in 2020 to build my own strategy on defending the integrity of elections in Brazil in 2022. That was pretty successful. And then in 2023, the U.S. civil society reached out to me to say, Flávia, that's our turn to learn from your experience. How did you guys manage to defend the integrity of elections? And we've been exchanging, of course, last year as well. And as I don't know if everyone's familiar with Brazilian political landscape, but I would say that over the past decade, U.S. and Brazil, like the similarities between our political landscape and this authoritarian phenomenon is extremely striking. So, of course, it's not only about the U.S. and Brazil, but and we've been building smaller alliances, networks of networks, building collaboration and solidarity in order to face these challenges in different countries. But I think my main example would be building this great connections and building trust with them, and we'll have like a long-term collaboration and relationship as we do have with the U.S. civil society in Brazil. And when we've been also working in a more broad perspective and sharing this with other countries as well.
Thank you for bringing in the critical importance of the journalism sector as well in that example. Flávia Pellegrino, Elyssa Feder, thank you for being here.
Brad.